Aristotle, one of the most influential philosophers in Western history, contributed extensively to metaphysics, ethics, logic, and natural science. However, his views on women, often controversial and criticized even in antiquity, have long been a point of contention in the study of his legacy. While some argue that his views merely reflected the scientific limitations and cultural norms of his time, others, like Sister Prudence Allen, assert that Aristotle's conception of femininity stems from deeper metaphysical and philosophical commitments embedded in his broader system of thought. The biological basis. Woman as the defective male. At the biological level, Aristotle viewed the female as a deficient or deformed male. In his theory of reproduction, he assigned the man an active, form-imparting role, while the woman occupied a passive, material one. For Aristotle, the male supplies the form and logos the rational and structural essence of the human being through his seed, while the female provides only the matter, the material substrate needed for the body to develop. This position appears most starkly in his work Generation of Animals, where he writes, "The male is by nature superior, and the female inferior, and the one rules and the other is ruled. This principle of necessity extends to all mankind." In this framework, the male is hot, active, and generativable to transform blood into potent seed containing the immaterial essence of human form. The female, by contrast, is colder, more passive, and unable to transform her blood into anything more than menstrual material, a necessary part of reproduction, but without the vital principle that initiates life. This theory stands in contrast to earlier pre-Socratic philosophers. As Sister Prudence Allen notes in The Concept of Woman, Volume 2, thinkers like Empedocles and Parmenides posited a double-seed theory, where both parents contributed equally to the formation of new life. Empedocles suggested that the mother and father each provided half of the seed, while Parmenides argued that both contributed competing seeds that battled for dominance in the womb. Aristotle rejected these notions not due to a lack of awareness, but rather because they conflicted with his deeper metaphysical convictions. Metaphysical foundations of gender hierarchy. Aristotle's understanding of biology was not merely empirical. It was deeply intertwined with his metaphysics, particularly his theory of form and matter. According to Aristotle, everything in the natural world is composed of both form, the organizing principle or essence of a thing, and matter, the underlying substance or potentiality. In generation, the male provides the form, while the female contributes the matter. This division was not neutral. For Aristotle, form is superior to matter. It is the source of definition, structure, and purpose. Matter, while necessary, is formless on its own, needing form to actualize its potential. In mapping this metaphysical dichotomy onto the genders, Aristotle reinforced a hierarchical view of human nature. Male as form, activity, and rationality. Female as matter, passivity, and physicality. Allen explains that this wasn't an incidental view but a systematic one. Aristotle's metaphysical bias led him to associate maleness with other prime attributes, such as light, heat, strength, and divinity, while femaleness was linked to their privative opposites, darkness, coldness, weakness, and inferiority. The male-female opposition became homologous with other hierarchies in Aristotle's thought, such as form versus matter, active versus passive, hot versus cold, rational versus emotional, perfect versus defective. Thus, for Aristotle, gender difference became a metaphysical problem. If males and females belong to the same species, Homo sapiens, but differ so radically in function and capacity, how can this differentiation be explained? Aristotle's solution lay in contrariety, one of the key principles of his metaphysics. In a contrariety, one term is always primary, and the other is a deprivation or privation of that term. Cold is a lack of heat. Darkness is the absence of light. Following this logic, woman is defined not in her own right, but as a lack of man. Ethical and political implications. This metaphysical and biological framework had far-reaching ethical and political consequences. In Aristotle's political philosophy, particularly in politics, he extends the natural hierarchy to justify male dominance in the household and the city-state. He writes, "The male is by nature fitter for command than the female. The courage of a man is shown in commanding, of a woman in obeying." Here, Aristotle folds his metaphysical assumptions into a broader theory of natural justice. Just as the soul should govern the body, and reason should govern the passions, so too should the man govern the woman. This isn't simply a social convention. It's presented as an organic, divinely ordered structure. Even the virtue of women, according to Aristotle, is derivative. Men and women may share the same general virtues like courage, temperance, or justice. But Aristotle insists that these virtues manifest differently in each gender. A woman's courage is not the same as a man's courage. Hers is a more passive endurance, while his is active bravery. Even the soul, which for Aristotle is the seat of rationality, is considered cooler or less developed in women. Philosophical legacy of devaluation. Aristotle's theory of gender polarity did more than reflect the norms of his time. It provided philosophical foundations for a consistent and structured devaluation of the female. His conception of woman as a deformed man can be traced through centuries of philosophical and theological thought, deeply shaping Western attitudes toward women. Allen writes, "At the very least, we find the male contribution to generation associated with the divine activity, form, heat, strength, fertility, and ability, while the female contribution is associated with deformation, passivity, matter, cold, weakness, infertility, and inability." This valuation colored not only Aristotle's account of reproduction, but also his views on education, citizenship, and ethics. Women, being less rational, were excluded from full participation in civic life. They could not be citizens in the truest sense, as they lacked the rational autonomy necessary to deliberate on the common good. Even in Aristotle's Ethics, which emphasized the cultivation of virtue and the rational soul, women were viewed as incapable of attaining the highest forms of ethical excellence. Since rationality was the defining characteristic of human nature for Aristotle, and since he believed women to be naturally deficient in reason, their moral and philosophical potential was inherently limited. Beyond Aristotle, critique and reappraisal. While some defenders of Aristotle have attempted to excuse his views as products of his time, Allen and others argue that such a defense is insufficient. After all, alternative theories of equal male-female contribution to reproduction already existed in his day. Moreover, Aristotle's commitment to hierarchy was not merely observational, it was systematic and ideologically embedded in his very definitions of nature, reason, and virtue. This legacy has not gone unchallenged. Later philosophers and scientists, from early modern thinkers like Mary Estelle and Margaret Cavendish to contemporary feminist theorists, have rigorously critiqued Aristotle's assumptions. Modern biology, too, has long since debunked the Aristotelian notion that women merely provide inert matter in reproduction. We now understand that both sperm and egg contribute equally to the genetic makeup of a child, and that the developmental process is far more collaborative and reciprocal than Aristotle imagined. Yet despite these advances, Aristotle's influence lingers. His hierarchical dualisms have echoed throughout Western philosophy, theology, and science, often reinforcing gender roles and limiting women's opportunities for full intellectual, moral, and political participation. A complex legacy. Aristotle's view of women, grounded in his metaphysical and biological theories, represents one of the darker and more troubling aspects of his otherwise brilliant philosophical legacy. By conceiving of women as passive, deficient, and inherently inferior, he helped shape a worldview in which gender inequality was not only accepted, but naturalized, rooted in the very structure of being. Understanding this aspect of Aristotle is crucial not only for historical accuracy, but also for recognizing the deep philosophical roots of gender bias in Western thought. Only by confronting and critically examining these foundations can we move toward a more inclusive and equitable philosophical tradition, one in which women are seen not as defective men, but as fully rational, moral, and equal participants in the human story.